heard of this thing in Williamstown, Kentucky called the Ark Encounter? Yeah, I just saw this on YouTube the other day, and I guess I was sort of aware that it existed, but when I watched the video, I was intrigued. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a life-size replica of Noah's Ark. Literally. I mean, it's like, I think it's 500 feet long. I mean, the thing is enormous. But when I was watching the video about the motivation behind it, it really got me to thinking. See, their motivation was to show people just how plausible Noah's Ark actually was. Why? Well, because most of us grew up in Sunday school reading picture books that showed images of Noah's Ark that looked like wicker baskets with giraffes and lions and rhinos bursting at the seams. And at the time we thought it was cute, but later in life, when our friends or in college, when our professors started challenging the plausibility of that, it could have been a little bit disturbing. It could have shaken our faith. Why? Because, well, what we thought about Noah's Ark was based on misconceptions that came from picture books. Well, it got me thinking about misconceptions in the Bible and how they can alter the course of somebody's life. You might have been someone who grew up in the church who grew frustrated with some of the inaccuracies or inconsistencies in Scripture, and you decided that you didn't want to have anything to do with it. Or maybe you're still in the church, maybe you're still in the faith today, and you just don't know how to explain some of these things when they come up in conversation. So we're going to explore many of those really in this YouTube channel, but one of them today specifically because the Easter season is coming. So if you were to ask most church-going Christians, or even those of you who show up on Christmas and on Easter, no judgment here, what day of the week was Jesus crucified? Most would say on a Friday. And if you were to ask what day of the week did Jesus rise from the dead? Most would say Sunday. And then if you ask how many days was Jesus dead and buried? They'd say 3. There's a problem though. If you do the math, you run into a little bit of a challenge. Before we do the math though, let's be specific here. Let's see what the Bible actually said. So in Matthew 12, Jesus said specifically, as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, so will I be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. All right, so Jesus himself, God who became man and lived a perfect life for 33 years so that he could pay the death penalty that we were supposed to pay, so that we can put our faith in him and spend eternity with him in doing so. We can't earn our way to heaven. That Jesus, perfect Jesus, said he was going to be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. In fact, a lot of people knew about this. In Matthew chapter 27, Jewish leaders were concerned about what he said. In fact, they asked for guards to guard the tomb of Jesus. And they said specifically, he said he would rise again after 3 days. We don't want one of his disciples to grab his body and claim that he rose. That'll create all kinds of issues, so let's guard the tomb. So this was common knowledge. All right, enough backdrop. Let's do the math. We have Friday afternoon as 1 day, and I'm sure you're thinking, it's kind of a stretch. It is. We'll get there. 1 day. Then you have Friday night being 1 night. Then you have Saturday being the second day, So Saturday is the second day. Saturday night is the second night. Then you have Sunday morning, which is when we believe that Jesus rose from the dead, being the third day, but we don't get a third night. So that's kind of a problem. Again, maybe you want to stretch some things, but you can't find a third night there. And Jesus said 3 days and 3 nights. He didn't just say 3 days. And guess what? You can actually make this look worse. Because in Matthew 28, we see that Mary Magdalene and the other Mary got to the tomb before the sun came up. Well, the way the Jews look at day and night, which matters when you're looking at Scripture, nighttime begins the prior day at sundown. So, for instance, on Friday afternoon, when the sun goes down, it becomes Saturday night. Okay? Then the day begins when sun comes up. Well, if Mary Magdalene and the other Mary arrived early Sunday morning before the sun came up, then guess what? It was still night. So we don't even get that day. This is important because now we're down to 2 days and 2 nights. And again, Jesus said it would be 3 days and 3 nights. So what happened? Well, when you look at John chapter 19, It says that Jesus' body had to come down off of the cross because the Sabbath was coming. And again, the Orthodox Jews celebrate Saturday as being the Sabbath. And since Saturday would begin at sundown on Friday, we interpret that as meaning Jesus was crucified on Friday and had to be taken down off the cross before the sun went down. But John chapter 19 says something else very interesting. It says, because it was a high day. Do you know what a high day is? I know I didn't until I looked at the Old Testament. And the beauty of the Old Testament is it unlocks so much of the New Testament for us. In fact, in Exodus, God tells Moses about all the laws that he wanted the Jews to keep. But he also talked about a lot of the feasts that he wanted them to keep. And he said, keep my Sabbaths, plural, not just Sabbath, singular. Then when you look at the book of Leviticus, I know everybody's favorite book, in chapter 23, God details out what these feasts look like. One of them is called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And it takes place the day after Passover, and it's 7 days long. And the first day and the last day of that feast, high days. They are Sabbaths. You are to do no work on those days whatsoever. So let's go back to the New Testament. Let's go back to the week of Jesus' crucifixion. We know that John chapter 19 said his body had to come down before the Sabbath. Why? Because it was a high day. And that is exactly how it is described in the book of Leviticus when referring to the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And most experts would tell you that Passover occurred on Wednesday that week, which places the first day, the Sabbath day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, on Thursday. Now all of a sudden, you have 3 days and 3 nights without any trouble at all. And don't worry, don't panic, don't go backing out of this video because I just said something that was against everything that you believed. There are a lot of things that we were raised to believe that the Bible just simply doesn't back up. So my question for you is this: who do you want to believe, or where do you want to put your faith? In the tradition of men, or in what God says in his word? Because ultimately it's what God says that counts. So we're going to spend time on this YouTube channel exploring things just like this. And I'll give you a little taste of things to come. Maybe not our next video, but just another example of a misconception where you might be thinking, what? How many kings came to the manger where Jesus was born? Just a thought. We'll see you next time.